Okay, if I could ask everybody to take their seats, we're ready to start. And with no more ado, I would like to welcome Paul for some opening words, our CEO.
Thanks, Sue, and good morning, everybody. It's good to see so many familiar faces. I have to say I'm lucky I'm here. I just walked in 1 minute ago. The whole year I go back and forth, and there's fog at City, and planes are cancelled, but normally at this time of the year it works. But this morning, this plane I was supposed to board had a problem with the engine, and then back and forth I nearly didn't make it. But it's also good to be on Twitter for the first time. I actually joined Twitter about a week ago, and I looked at Twitter this morning, and I saw that some of you have been heavily tweeting already about this event, and we certainly look forward to it. You know, there are some advantages if you're stuck in an airplane for a few hours. You probably end up reading 10 papers, whilst you normally only read 1 or 2. And it was interesting this morning when I read the papers, I was thinking about today and what is going to happen, because we're all excited about it. It's without any doubt we couldn't have been here with our plan, which has a lot of good things and a lot of opportunities, but we couldn't have been here with this plan, the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, without the help of all of you. We've said in the beginning already when we started it, it's a thing of partnership, because the challenges that are out there are simply too big for all of us to do them alone. And you, with your presence here and with your support over the last 5 years, you understand that much better than anybody else, and I want to thank you for that. But it's interesting, if you look at the newspapers today, the first one, what caught my heading was Goldman Sachs deciding to get out of coal. You know, some of these investment houses were heavily investing in the wrong things, and we all know that, you know, if we want to really get within the 2 degrees, we have to start stranding some of these assets. And it's interesting to see that even financial houses like Goldman and Sachs, which are usually more driven by money than anything else, are getting into some common sense action. Then I flipped the pages, and interestingly, I was talking about the World Bank, my friend Jim Kim. And the World Bank is obviously a big advocate, called for a price on carbon in September at the UN, if you all remember, got over 1,000 companies to sign, about 52% of the GDP calling for a price on carbon, sent a very strong signal to Paris as everybody prepares for the COP21. But interestingly, they hadn't really looked at their own pension investments. So there's 18.8 billion of own pension investments in the World Bank. And this article was all about people increasingly demanding that obviously when you preach a thing, you also have to live it. One of the things we did in Unilever, where we have a 17 billion pension plan, is immediately become part of the principles of responsible investment, but also not only that, be sure that the investments that we put in are responsibly invested in the spirit of the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And we're getting a very good return from that, not surprisingly. And it's good to see that the World Bank is now questioning also their own investments in green energy. And then the last thing that I was reading, just to add to my introductory remarks here, you know, Lake Mead is incredible. Only 35% of its capacity now, with all its problems. And talking to Jerry Brown the other day in California, where they have now water restrictions, etc., as Barbara knows, and Aaron, as he's sitting here, knows as well, it changes people's behaviors quite rapidly when you see this. But it also is a direct effect on the economy. You have no idea how many businesses are talking about relocating somewhere else because they simply don't have the basic necessities to provide for successful operations. And then you get into this virtuous circle that probably drives you down more than up, and we all understand that. And that's why we're here, is to see that it can be done differently. That is really what the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan is trying to prove, that there are business models where you can decouple growth from environmental impact and improve the total social impact. I've long ago said that CSR is not enough anymore, that for companies to be long-term accepted, they need to make a positive contribution in actually solving some of the issues that are there already. Just being less bad is not good enough. So be it the issues of food security, employment with, for us, smallholder farmers, or be it the issues of sanitation, or be it the issues of water, and all the things that you are so passionate about, companies need to make a positive contribution to help solve that. And that goes to the essence of the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. Today is the 5th anniversary. Time goes fast. We've always said we look at it in increments of 10 because these are long-term plans and they need to be solved with solutions that take more than the quarterly reporting cycles, and we're well aware of that. But I think we've made great progress in the 5 years, but we've also learned a lot. So part of today is sharing with you these learnings, but also sharing with you some of the challenges. Life is not that easy. If it would be easy, we wouldn't be sitting here in the first place. So even as we roll out this plan, we encounter the same challenges in terms of changing consumer behaviors or in terms of some of the messages that we want to drive. And here again, we need your combined wisdom, energy, enthusiasm, and support to see how we can move these things forward. So today is really in the spirit of openness. There's nothing that is off the record. There's nothing that is prepared in terms of what we will show you. We will show you the way it is and the challenges we have, and hopefully we come out in a better place. We have some incredible sessions, 4 sessions actually. I first want to welcome His Excellency Rajan Mathai, who is obviously the High Commissioner of India and a great supporter from our time at HUL already. He was a Foreign Secretary in India before. Great supporter in what we're doing with the Prince of Wales in the Social Entrepreneur Award, where we have had the full support. And not surprisingly, being from India, you're passionate about the WASH program, water, sanitation and hygiene. And Kees and Nitin will help with that session. So that is one session around WASH. How can we drive it higher? Then we have Andrew here, Andrew Winston, obviously the bestseller of The Big Pivot, which I think is one of the best books written in terms of summarizing what is going on there, and very much lives the philosophy of what we have in the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And Andrew will be joined by David Blanchett and Jeff Seabright to really talk about the big challenge of net zero emission. And that's a big challenge. I'm waiting for all the targets to come in for Paris, and I have my fingers crossed. I have some bets. I only bet for charity. I don't bet for money. But you can get quite a lot of money if you tell it's for charity. And so that's why I like that part of it. But, we need to see what the countries are coming into. If they're coming in at, my thing is that the total targets will add up to about 40% or so. And then it needs business and others sectorially to see if we can finish that gap and give some more courage to the politicians. So it will be a very interesting session and very timely. Farouk is here, Farouk Khan. I see Farouk sitting in the back. Farouk and I met in Pakistan before he moved to London. He's the CEO of Acumen here and obviously he will join, not surprisingly, Kevin Havelock, who runs our refreshment business, and Lena in a lively discussion about livelihoods, which is one of our other focus areas. And then Aaron, President and CEO of Business for Social Responsibility, the global non-profit network and consultancy you also still do. That's probably how you make your money to sit here. Working on sustainability. Aaron is obviously a key advisor to Unilever, as well as helped us tremendously put our plans together. And he will be joined by Doug Bailey and Pierluigi Segismondi to discuss fairness in the workplace. So here you have it: WASH, net zero emission, livelihoods, fairness in the workplace. 4 big buckets that underpin our Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. I don't want to say too much more, but let me just conclude with 1 or 2 comments. It is increasingly clear to me that what we're trying to do, perhaps not how we do all the things, but what we're trying to do makes a lot of sense. As a chairman of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, I see more and more companies coming in. And I think the reason is twofold. Some of the people actually discover what is going out there, what is happening out there, because they have their children talk to them, or they live in the real world and have a little bit of a higher level of awareness and engagement, and that is good. And the other ones that are not quite totally there yet are actually quickly driven there by the sheer fact that the cost of not doing anything, what I call the cost of inaction, is starting to be higher than the cost of action. So even the CEOs that might not have believed in all the lofty talk that we have underpinning our Unilever Sustainable Living Plan are actually seeing that not doing anything is more costly. They're also starting to discover increasingly the enormous opportunities there are. The enormous opportunities to mainstream sustainability in the economy. For us, it's an enormous business driver and growth, and we're getting some facts about that businesses that are more sustainable, driven by a deeper sense of purpose, undoubtedly Kees and others are going to talk about that today, are more profitable and are growing faster. There's a 3 to 10 trillion opportunity waiting out there for us to take if we do it smartly, and can take it in a much better way than anybody else. I'm also pleased to see that the financial community is also waking up. You have now increasingly 34 trillion of capital asking for a price on carbon. Increasingly, people like Larry Fink and others talking about long-termism and how do you focus the economy more on the long term versus this rat race of quarterly. And then you see the bigger pension funds in increasing amounts, looking at their portfolios. Norges has obviously set the standard there, and many others, and saying, how do I invest to be sure not only that I have a good return, but that I have a responsible return. And when the financial community gets into the act, we can be assured that things will start to accelerate much faster than normally would happen. So I'm an optimist, but we also realize that a lot of work needs to be done, and we want to continue to set the pace. I'm also very pleased looking at the list of invitees that there are fellow companies here, because it's not only that we talk with civil society or governments or NGOs, but it's also good to see that we invite some of the more progressive companies out there to help each other to drive it to a higher level. So I wanted to welcome you as well. I certainly look forward to a great, energizing morning with the best ideas hopefully coming in openness and enthusiasm, and then helping us drive this to a higher level. Thanks already. I'll conclude it at the end of the day with some of the learnings from the breakout sessions. But for now, I think I have to hand it over to Sue. Go ahead.
So I'm Sue Garrard, as it says up there on the slide. I'm responsible for sustainable business development and communications. We've called today Scaling for Impact for all the reasons that Paul has talked about. We've been live running now for 4 years, and we're really starting to understand how we can scale for impact with our sustainability mission, both inside the business and in a way, possibly more importantly, to leverage that scale more widely. And that's what we really want to talk about today. I'm not going to go through our performance in detail. Each of you should be on a seat which had a booklet on it. That has got a high-level summary of our performance. But if you go onto our website, you will find loaded already there lots of detail against our performance against each of those targets. So I'm just going to go through each of the big 3 in turn. And the first of those is around health, hygiene and well-being. And perhaps not surprisingly, because this of course is the lifeblood of our business, this is an area where we are still making good progress. So you can see here from the slide in front of you that we're now at a point after 4 years where we have helped improve nearly 400 million lives. And that's through some of our key brands. That's Lifebuoy, Pureit, Dove and Signal. And we are confident that we're on track to hit our target of 1 billion by or during 2020. So that side of things is working well. Where we have a more mixed picture, however, is on the environmental front. Now, as some of you will know, we set ourselves the challenge of having targets that work right the way across the value chain. What we see within our own operations, again, is that we're making good progress. In particular, I'd call out the progress around zero waste to landfill, which we've actually achieved several years early. And in doing so, we've actually reduced levels of waste by 140,000 tonnes, and we've avoided costs of some 220 million euros. So that side of things is working well. But the challenge here, and that's what these top 3 bits of data show, is what's happening in the consumer use element of the value chain. Now, this perhaps won't be surprising to many of you. It's the most difficult area, more broadly, consumer behaviour change. But it's something that we've talked about before that continues to be a challenge. So we see a 12% reduction in waste. We see a 2% reduction on water. But our greenhouse gas has actually gone up. And although that's due to an acquisition, what it's indicating is just how stubborn driving that change is and how long term it is. And that's something that we can unpack for you a little bit later. So we are looking there at a degree of decoupling because, as the chart says, over the same period of time, we've actually seen sales growth. So the big picture aim of decoupling is starting to work, but it's something where we're very keen to work with partners to try and make some more progress. Turning then to a specific but very big area, which is around our sustainable sourcing. This relates to raw materials for agricultural purposes. This is one that bridges our latter 2 of our big goals, but is very important to us as a food business. And again, here we're currently on track. You'll see here again from the slide that we're up to 55% of our agricultural raw materials now sustainably sourced. And crucially, Knorr, which many of you will know is one of our biggest food brands, now sources over 90% of all its main ingredients, of which there are 13, from sustainable sources. So again, we're feeling confident that unless anything unexpected happens, we're making good progress and we're on track on that front. And then finally, more broadly on enhanced livelihoods. This is also going well. It's an area that we talked about last year because we actually expanded our plan. Many of you said to us that you felt that our focus was too narrow on the environment and not sufficient on the social. And we listened and responded to that by broadening out the plan. Since then, we will have seen more progress, and over the period of the plan, we've actually now reached out to over 800,000 smallholder farmers. We've also, and this is a conservative figure because we're very cautious about the data sources we can really rely on, but we've helped, we think, at least 238,000 women through skills and training provision, including our now famous Shakti, which is now extended to 70,000 women in rural India, which is a crucial source of domestic income for them and a good source of growth for us. We're also doing much broader work, which is led by Jeff's team, on how we can do more to empower women right the way through our value chain. And so that's work that's in train at the moment, and you'll hear quite a lot about that, I suspect, if you're here this time next year. And then the final headline, I think, to pull out on this is that we, as you know, have been determined to try and be public about our progress on human rights. We will later this year be publishing our first human rights report, which will be something of a landmark, and that is going to be based on the UN's guiding principles reporting framework. And those of you that are in the breakout group can interrogate us in more detail about that. So that's all I plan to say. As I said at the start, just a very high-level summary. I'd encourage you, if you'd like to ask us more questions, to use both the Q&A and the informal networking lunch that will take place afterwards. But there is an absolute ton of information also available for you online. So just one final thought from me before I hand over to Keith. It's crucial that we are, I think, public about both our struggles and our progress on our targets. But actually, just as essential is for us to really understand how sustainability is driving and supporting our business, and ultimately those two things actually coming together. We have a very simple model that we use, the Virtuous Circle of Growth. Again, I don't propose to go into detail here, but the diagram that you have in front of you depicts the three ways in which we have a virtuous circle in the area of sustainability driving growth. And the good news is that now we are starting to really understand and be able to leverage how sustainability contributes to all three areas of that. We have on the slide an example of the kind of cost savings that we're starting to leverage, and indeed in large parts of the organisation that's becoming a process of continuous improvement. But it's also inspiring people in David Blanchard's team, our head of R&D, to develop sustainably led innovations, whether it's laundry products or compressed deodorants. So for us now, the business case is very clear. And what I'd like to do is invite Keith to join us to talk a little bit more about the heartland of our business, which is brands, and how they're contributing.
Well, thank you, Sue, and a very good morning to all of you as well. And I'm Keith Weed, and we very much want to put sustainability, social and environmental sustainability, at the heart of our business model in Unilever. And that's the reason why, on one side, I head sustainability, but I also head the marketing function as well. So I often find myself in front of a whole group of marketers talking to them about the importance of sustainability, social and environmental sustainability. So it's nice for a change to be in front of a group that's largely focused on the sustainability agenda, talking to you about marketing. So there's the other version. Because what is key about it is the messages are exactly the same. So the messages are about scaling social impact. The messages are about building our brands. And the messages are about engaging and inspiring people to act differently, and also about growing our business and growing our sales. Now, there's a lot of talk in the marketing world and the business world about brands with purpose, or brands that matter. And here in Unilever, we have our sort of own take on that. We want to make sure that we can create something called sustainable living brands. And what do I mean by that? Well, very much it is about brands with purpose, but sustainable living purpose, but also about sustainable living products. So on the purpose side, we look at how can we actually have a measurable impact on society, and how can we measurably improve our brands and inspire and engage more people. So there's a clear agenda about what we want to achieve on the brand purpose side. But similarly, on the sustainable living products, we want to make sure that our products deliver against the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, as Sue's already articulated, those big pillars around decoupling growth from environmental footprint, about how we're going to help people with better well-being and health and hygiene and nutrition, and also using products that are sustainably sourced. And it's bringing those two thoughts together, the purpose and the products, we then have this idea of sustainable living brands. And the good news is we're starting to get some evidence behind these. And if you want to remember one chart for my presentation, this is the killer chart. If you want to remember one chart for my presentation, it's this one. Because if we look at our growth in 2014, about 50% of our growth came from what we call the sustainable living brands. But importantly, they grew at twice that of our other brands. So we're already seeing a growth component coming in. And then on top of that, their margin performance was better than the average as well. 200 basis points better gross margin. Now, that's not a huge amount. Having said that, it is very much against the thought that a lot of people say that having sustainability in your brands and products reduces your margin because it increases costs. So this is starting to prove you can grow your brands and you can improve your margin as well. And if we look at the journey from 2010 to 2014 at our sustainable living brands, look at just at the top 30 brands within Unilever, we started with about 3 or 4 of them under this definition of sustainable living brands. We're now about 11. So we're getting meaningful progress there. And if you look at the brands that are really sort of leading in this area, the ones up on the chart here, the Ben & Jerry's, the Doves, the Comforts, the Lifebuoys, the ones who got into this first within Unilever, they're growing at high single-digit, low double-digit growth rates right now. So really remarkable evidence that this does matter to people and people want to engage in our brands for this reason as well. So now we have a second wave of sort of sustainable living brands coming through, and I want to highlight just a few of them to give you a taste of that. This one is our Dirt is Good brand. So it has a different brand name in different countries. It's Omo in many countries. It's Persil here in the UK. It's Surf Excel in India, for example. And this brand has been known for a long period of time around child development and very much focusing on go out, get dirty, experience life, learn a lot, and don't you worry because Omo will get your clothes clean afterwards. And now we want to build on this area in the area of child education. So we know that 58 million children in the world do not have education. There's another 130 million who have a very poor education. And how can Omo take part on really building that as part of its purpose as well? So we're starting this year, and you're going to see that building throughout this year and into next. Or another brand, Vaseline. Already hundreds of millions of people rely on Vaseline for their skincare. But what about the real tough moments, on the front line, in disasters, in refugee camps? People have lots of skin problems. How can we help there? So as an example, we've already been working with dermatologists in Jordan, principally with the Syrian refugees, and helping them with their skin problems with products that you know well, Vaseline, petroleum jelly, and others. And the idea is to scale that program to 1 million people. But you can start seeing the healing project and working with direct relief is something very much at the core of what Vaseline stands for. Or another example, Sunlight, one of our oldest brands, not no longer here in the UK, but a big brand across Southeast Asia and beyond. And here we want to help women in the whole quest for water. Every day, 200 million hours are spent on searching, carrying and bringing back water. And it's women who do this around the world. And could we start creating water centres where people could go and get clean water, they could wash their clothes, wash their dishes, and make life a little bit easier. And we have a couple of those that we've been piloting in Nigeria. I'm pleased to say the model has proven to work, and we're now looking to scale those with ourselves and also with our partners as well. So hopefully this gives you some sort of taste about why we think having sustainability at the heart of our brands is so important and why we've got evidence now it's working for us. And I think the reason why it's working for us is people are really starting to get interested in this. We're one of the largest commissioners of market research in the world. And we're seeing there's a shift that people are moving from a very much focus on my world to the world. So not just worrying about themselves, their families, their neighbours, but having an understanding of the world around them. Now, I don't know whether this is because of social media, and we see all these sort of environmental-driven disasters across social media, or perhaps it's just mobile and people becoming much more connected. Or indeed, perhaps it's a generational move going through. Our research tells us that millennials are twice as interested as Generation X in sustainable actions and sustainable products. In fact, products that don't just not do evil, but actually do good as well. And in fact, looking around here at quite a group of baby boomers, they are 4 times more likely than baby boomers to be interested in sustainability and sustainable action. And if you look at some of what our research tells us about what they're interested in, what's on the left of this chart, you can see these are very much areas of the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. So these areas are already focusing in, and probably one of the reasons why we're seeing in the piece of research from Boston Consultancy Group that in US grocery, 15% of US grocery is now driven by responsible consumption brands, and they're growing at 9%. And from that, we've been driving, with our consumers, messages as well. So the hashtag Bright Future, engaging young people around speeches. You'll have seen some of that before. We've now got 200 million people engaging with sharing videos or actions in that area, along with our partners, many of you in the room today. And that's building the Unilever brand and engaging young people. We also have projects like the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan's Young Entrepreneur Award, where we, around the world, engage young people in thinking innovative ways about how to move this agenda forward. We're a co-sponsor as well of collectively.org, and this is a millennial-focused initiative. There aren't many millennials in the room, so you probably aren't aware of this, but go and have a look at collectively.org, and this is both companies and indeed young people engaging in a more positive future. And an example of this actually coming together in real life, this is on the right of the slide is Anu, and she was one of the winners of the Young Entrepreneur Awards. And she has this whole thing based on mobile technology called Next Drop, and Sunlight's working with Next Drop. And this actually tells people when the next drop of water is going to come through the Indian pipes when water is turned off. And a lot of people stand around waiting for the water to come on so they can save it. And actually you can get signaled by your mobile that when the water is going to arrive in your area, saving time and real utility. Looking forward, more of the same. You all are aware of the big initiatives this year. We want to carry on building around the Unilever brand. But on top of that, we want to support 2 of the big things that are out there this year. First of all, around the Sustainable Development Goals and Global Citizens. So you'll see Unilever supporting that initiative. And then also on Live Earth and the whole Road to Paris and how we get 1 billion people engaged in signing up to very much encourage everyone who's in Paris to take action on climate. So that's what I was going to say. Hopefully it gives you an idea that very much our brands are beginning to make real traction in this area. And sustainability is very much at the core of how we sustainable living brands come in together. Now, when I started marketing many years ago, I often used to say that the only sustainable growth is consumer demand-led growth. And of course, the sustainable growth I was talking about then was sales growth, volume growth, building revenue. In a resource-restricted world, clearly that definition is no longer good enough. And sustainable growth needs to be sustainable both for society and for the environment as well. And I'm pleased to say we're getting increased evidence that people out there are really interested in this agenda. And now what we need to do is, of course, inspire and engage more people and build both our brands and our business, but of course, our social impact as well. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Keith. Good morning, everybody. It's my real pleasure to be here at my first USLP event. Keith just mentioned the SDGs and the Paris Climate Summit and the ways in which we're going to leverage our voice and our brands to engage with consumer citizens to be a force for positive change in this critical year. And it's really in that context that I want to talk a little bit today about the priorities that we have for transformational change. And I like to think of this in terms of sort of 3 prints: footprint, handprint, blueprint. This is a framework that others have used. I think Dow is in the room today. This is part of the framework used there. And it really sort of suggests that while we're all working very hard on reducing our footprint as businesses, that the simple reality is that incremental change, making less of a mess, doing less harm as we continue to grow is not going to get us where we need to go. That's a simple fact. We also, importantly, need to drive transformational change, to apply our handprint as a business, our unique opportunity to be a catalyst for really system-level change, to help reshape and transform markets, to bend, if you will, the path of business as usual. That's the task at hand if we're going to do what we need to get on to do. And the blueprint of this is, of course, the plan that the global community is working hard on this year to end poverty, a framework to end poverty within the next generation, and to keep global warming within 2 degrees. So last year at the USLP Refresh, we recognized that we really needed to focus on our handprint to drive transformational change in these 3 areas. And let me just take each in turn briefly. On eliminating deforestation. Deforestation accounts for roughly up to 15% of total greenhouse gases today, more than the entire global transport sector. So it's a huge part of the challenge. And 4 commodities, palm oil, soy, beef, and timber, drive half of that. So they were responsible for half of that 15%. We are a very significant player in palm oil and have, I believe, a real obligation and opportunity, to coin a phrase, to make sustainable palm oil commonplace. And that's the journey that we've been on. So the work that we're now doing stands on the shoulders of lots of people at Unilever who've been at this for over 10 years, helping co-found with WWF the RSPO in 2004. In 2010, in this building, the Consumer Goods Forum first conversation on this very floor took place around avoided deforestation with Paul's leadership to drive that CGF commitment of net zero deforestation by 2020. The creation of the Tropical Forest Alliance in 2012 at the Rio Conference, the New York Declaration on Forests just last September in New York. All of this is part of a journey that has led us to this moment of sustained momentum that we've seen in this sector, to the point where, with the pressure, in a sense, of the New York Declaration and the building momentum, we've seen enormous progress and really a tipping point in traders, growers, and suppliers making commitments around sustainable palm oil, to the point where 96% of globally traded palm oil is now committed to be sustainably sourced. That is a huge deal. It's a great achievement, and it is not over, because only 18% of palm oil today is certified as sustainably sourced. So there's a lot of work to turn these pledges into action. But we have the pledges, and we have the pledges from very significant, important players. And this has, I think, created the potential for a real tipping point in this sector, and many, I believe, are seeing this area of focus around avoided deforestation and supply chains as a real model for what sectoral transformative change looks like. So we have to deliver on this, and it's very promising. A second and related area is sustainable agriculture and livelihoods. We all know that growing food needs and climate disruption are placing enormous stress on the global food system. The greatest burden falls on the hundreds of millions of smallholder farmers in the developing and emerging markets. 85% of the world's farmers are smallholder farmers. They produce 70% of the world's food. And that's why our main focus is really on helping improve the yields and the livelihoods of these farmers. Their success is key to our success and to global food security. And as Sue has mentioned, we've trained over 800,000 smallholder farmers since 2010, from vanilla farmers in Madagascar to tomato growers in China. Going forward, our challenge in this area is, how do we scale up? How do we focus on cross-sector collaboration and get replicable models to drive real transformational change? Since the beginning of this year, we've launched several very strategic partnerships to help us improve the yields and the livelihoods of millions of smallholder farmers. And we're increasingly incorporating the WASH agenda, women's empowerment and nutrition, as part of a comprehensive, more holistic approach to our engagement with smallholders. So it's not just about yields. We've begun partnerships with IFAD, with GAIN, Acumen, represented here by Farouk, and Clinton Justra Enterprise Partnership, Oxfam, Ford Foundation. Paul was just in the Netherlands 2 weeks ago signing a memorandum of understanding with the Dutch Development Agency, which will include, importantly, work around this. And just last Friday, Boris Rafalski here, and Rebecca Marmot, and Camille Chamas and I were in Utrecht talking all day with Solidaridad about our commitment and joint partnership with them to empower 1 million additional smallholder farmers and come up with replicable models for how we can transform this sector. So we're making progress, not enough, but some progress indeed. And last but not least, Wash, as perhaps the only global company that really has the strengths, the insights, and the brands in all three elements, related areas of wash, we are really uniquely positioned to play a leadership role to build markets for ourselves, to create a healthier future for our consumers. And today I just want to focus briefly on the S of wash, sanitation. In September last year, Domestos introduced a new target on sanitation, a commitment to help 25 million people gain improved access to toilets by 2020. On World Toilet Day, we launched the Toilet Board, a global business-led coalition of experts, NGOs, businesses to develop sustainable market-based models to help scale up demand for toilets. And importantly, we've also pledged our support, our full support, to Prime Minister Modi's Clean India campaign and his leadership to provide sanitation to every Indian by 2019. And we are indeed very honored that the High Commissioner is here with us today. And using our global advocacy, we've been working to achieve a standalone sustainable development goal around water and sanitation. And this is important because this will be a guide for national policymakers for 15 years into the future. So this is a tremendous opportunity. And we're also, of course, scaling up partnerships. So we've entered into a new partnership, very exciting partnership with the Children's Investment Fund, for example, to bring hand washing to 9 million children in Bihar in India, and many other examples with DFID, WaterAid, Plan and WASAP in Bangladesh and Pakistan. I won't go on. So this year really is, I believe, a huge opportunity on the WASH agenda with the Sustainable Development Goals and the focus that will give to this, the leadership that Prime Minister Modi has demonstrated, and the opportunity for us as part of the WASH community to really elevate and advocate and transform this into a real movement to meet the very important goals around WASH that we have. So in sum, we're making progress in driving transformational change. We have a lot more to do, a lot more to learn from all of you, and hence the theme of today, scaling for impact. So now we're going to move to the second part of today's event. This is when we actually hear from you. And we have, as Paul outlined, selected 4 topics for discussion, each of which will be joined by 2 Unilever representatives and each by one of our eminent guests who will provide, I'm sure, very stimulating thoughts to get us started. You will each attend 2 of these sessions. They're indicated in your invitation as well as on your badges. Full details will be given to you in your first meeting room, which are 3 are behind me, and the Livelihoods session will be on this end of the room, but the other 3 will be behind me. We're then going to reconvene back here at 12:45 for a short summation of our discussions and remarks from Paul. And let me conclude finally and reiterate what Sue had mentioned. Please don't forget to use your iPads to send us any questions that you might have had in the course of this session or in the follow-on discussions that we'll have in the breakout groups. So thank you very much for your listening. That was a lot of talking at you. Now we want to talk with you. Very much look forward to the discussions, and we have staff to help guide you to the rooms. Thank you very much.